Hi everybody, so today I'm going to talk about the basics of squad building for Star Wars Armada. A lot of new players usually ask for help building squadrons and building their fleet, and I want to talk about that because it's one of the most common questions I see. I'm also going to do an advanced building video, so stay tuned after this. If you already got the basics down and you want to get a little bit more technical, I'm going to go into that in a follow-up video. But for this I want to start out for the beginner who is just getting into Armada, or maybe you haven't even gotten into Armada yet but you want to find out a little bit more to it. So let me talk about the rules. The basic rules for building a squad. This is a point game, so you're going to come with an army with a list of 400 points. 400 is currently the standard for any official play, or as well as league play and tournaments. It wasn't always 400, so if you're a little confused by that, when the game first launched, with Wave 1 there was a 300 point limit because there weren't enough ships available for everybody to fly 400 points. And so the point value has changed a little bit over time. When just the core set was announced, it was even smaller than that. It is also conceivable that in the future, if you're watching this video a couple years from now, the point limit may raise for standard and sanctioned play. But as of the time of this video, and what has been the norm ever since Wave 2, is that a 400 point battle is the standard. So you'll want to make sure that when you're building your list, you come as close to 400 points as you can, at least for your first list. It's also important to know that you're going to have squadrons in your list. You're probably going to want to have squadrons in your list, and you cannot exceed 1/3 of the current fleet cap. So with a 400 point list, 134 points is the most you are allowed to have for squadrons. So if you come in at 135, that's illegal. So that's important to know. You also must have a commander in your fleet. Now this is actually, it sounds silly, but if you played the game before, but a lot of people do this when they're new. They come in not using a commander because commanders tend to be expensive, and it's very easy to kind of make your first couple of fleets and either forget to include a commander or not want to include one because of the extra cost. You also must have 3 objectives. You need 1 assault objective, 1 defense objective, and 1 navigation objective. These are the red, yellow, and blue objective cards that come with the core set. If you happen to have green ones, ignore those. Those are specifically for the Corellian conflict campaign and do not apply to normal games. Those are special case ones, and you don't need to worry about those right now. But pick 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 yellow. It can be actually tricky for a new player to pick the right objectives, so if you want, and you're playing your first game, you don't necessarily have to have the objectives. If your opponent agrees, you can play a game without objectives, and what you do is you alternate who will be the first player, and you alternate initiative. So one round I will go first, and you will go second, and then the following round you will go first, and I will go second, and then you just repeat that over and over again. That's okay if you're just learning the basic rules, but I strongly suggest actually using objectives for a number of reasons. For one, it's going to get you used to normal sanctioned play, as well as it makes the game totally different. You can fly the exact same list against the exact same opponent, running the exact same list multiple games in a row, and it'll be vastly different depending on which objective. So the objectives add a ton of replayability, so I definitely suggest them. Sometimes they're a little confusing at first, but play through it a couple of times. You're going to grow to love the objectives. I certainly do. Next, we're going to make some choices when we're designing our first fleet. The first thing you need to choose is which faction you're going to play. Now, if you're into the game already, you may have already chosen a faction. You either want to play Imperials or Rebels. A lot of people base their purchases around their faction, and so you may have already made that decision. If so, the next step is I would suggest choosing a commander first, because that can sometimes help you in your fleet design. Next, you want to choose ships. Some people will choose ships before the commander. That doesn't really matter. What's important is that you do have a commander, and then you're going to need some ships. So I generally tell people to go for around 3 ships. Most fleets tend to have between 3 and 5, but 3 is a good starting point. I definitely don't suggest starting with only 2 ships if you can help it. If you can't, it's forgivable. I've seen people run with 2 ships. It's just very rare, and it also kind of restricts gameplay a little bit. However, if you're new and you guys don't have that many ships between you and your opponent, it's totally fine. You can even actually, if you wanted to play with less than 400 points, that's also forgivable too. You just agree with you. I mean, it's a fun game. You can do whatever you want. So, however, generally, if you're wondering what to start off with, 3 ships is kind of the minimum that I would suggest. 4 is actually a good middle of the road kind of number of ships if you're just not sure how many you should have. And 4 ships will a lot of times leave you enough room for some squadrons. So basically, and as far as choosing which ships, for your first couple of fleets, just pick whatever ships you like the best and what you can fit. If you're playing Imperials, for example, most people want to have at least one Imperial Star Destroyer. And I would kind of suggest just go with one of any given ship. It gives you a little bit more diversity, and also it makes the battlefield look more pretty when you have one big ship flanked by 2 smaller ships. It makes the whole thing look more thematic. And thematics is one thing that's really strong with this game. You can replicate a lot of familiar battles. You can replicate battles from Star Wars Rebels. You can replicate battles from the movies. It's you can replicate the Battle of Endor if you wanted to. It's really cool from that aspect, and you can use that as your inspiration towards building your fleet. And that's something that actually makes it very easy. You might not be the most effective fleet, but at least you'll have a working fleet. So either pick something thematic, pick whatever your favorite ships are, or just pick at random. But you will definitely want at least one tankier defensive ship, a ship with a lot of hull. Usually the larger ships are the more defensive ships that can stay alive longer, because you'll want to assign your commander to one of your most defensible ships, because that will then be your flagship. Like I said, you have to have one and only one commander, and they have to go on board your flagship. That flagship is important because if it gets destroyed, you will lose your commander, and all the benefits that your commander provides to your fleet will then go away. You will also want to have some squadrons. You don't have to have squadrons. It's not a rule, but it's a very strong recommendation. I have run lists without squadrons before, and usually I regret it. It is possible to fly, but if you're new, you also want to experience what squadrons bring to the game, so please at least start out flying a couple of squadrons. If you don't know where to get started with squadrons, I would suggest for maybe just going with 4 squadrons. Or for a point value, somewhere between 50, maybe more than just over 50 points, but less than 100 points. You don't want to start out with too many squadrons, and you don't want to start out with too few squadrons. So maybe 4 X-Wings or 6 TIE Fighters, or somewhere in that department is a good, comfortable starting spot. And that's what I would recommend. Now let's talk about upgrades. So once you have your ships and once you have your squadrons, you'll probably have some points left over, because don't forget, you have to keep a running tally of all the points. Everything has a point cost. So you'll probably have some points left for upgrades. One problem a lot of new people make is they put too many upgrades on a single ship. If you do this, if you try to put every single slot, you try to assign an upgrade to every single slot for your first game, you're going to get analysis paralysis. You're probably going to either forget to use stuff, or you're going to spend so much time trying to remember what everything does that you're not playing the game. So if you're going to use upgrades, now you don't have to put any upgrades on. You don't have to put upgrades on every ship. You can maybe just have maybe one ship with an upgrade, or maybe one upgrade per ship. You don't want to have too many upgrades. So I would suggest starting as a starting point with a single upgrade per ship, and only if you want to. You don't have to put an upgrade. You can leave some ships, bare bones if you would like. But that being said, let's talk about some specific upgrades and some rules that go along with them. Titles. Every ship in the game comes with at least one title in its expansion pack. Now, titles are unique, as indicated by the little dot in front of their name, as well as certain other unique cards, like certain officers are also unique. What this means is you can only have one of those in your entire fleet. Titles specifically also do not have a specific upgrade icon on the ship. So a new player might think, well, I can't put a title on this ship, it doesn't have a slot for it. A title doesn't need an upgrade slot. It's automatically assumed that every ship can assign a title, but you don't have to put a title on every ship. I can fly a Victory Star Destroyer that's with nothing, or I can fly a Victory Star Destroyer with the Warlord title, for example. But I could not fly 2 Victory Star Destroyers with the Warlord title. I could use a different title, but I could not use 2 of the same. Now, We talked about titles. I talked about the uniques. Some of your officers are unique, and in the future we might even see unique turbo laser upgrades or other things like that. But remember to look out for that little dot. That means that something is unique, and you can only have one of those in your fleet. There's also a type of upgrade called modification. Now, any type of upgrade can, in theory, say modification, but these are usually subsystems. A lot of turbo laser upgrades will say modification. Sometimes ion cannon upgrades will say modification. Sometimes defensive or offensive retrofit upgrades will say modification. If a card says modification, that means that is your only modification that you can put on that ship. You could not have a modification on a turbo laser upgrade and then also put a modification on a defensive retrofit. So modifications tend to be a little bit more powerful, but the drawback is you now can no longer put any other modifications. It's a one modification per ship limit. Even if it has the slot for another modification, you can only have one. So you don't want to use too many upgrades on a ship, but you also want to take a look at the upgrades that you are using and make sure that you understand what they do. Don't just put an upgrade if you're not really certain what it does. Start off using the upgrades that are simpler, like increases your armament, for example, like enhanced armaments, increases your battery armament on your left and right side by 1 red die. Well, that's pretty simple, and as a matter of fact, it comes with the core set. It's meant to be simple because it's meant to be one of the first upgrades that you get. Start off with upgrades like that, and then eventually, as you get more comfortable with the game and you learn the mechanics a little bit more, you can graduate to adding more upgrades or more complex upgrades that maybe you won't have understood your first game. Let's also talk about points. After you've added up all the upgrade points, you want to make sure that you do not exceed 400. You can come in right at 400 points for all of your ships, your commander, your squadrons, and your upgrades, but you cannot exceed 400. If you come in at less than 400, that's okay, but you don't want to be too much less. The reason for this is because if you are less than 400, you may have initiative. When you start to play somebody else, you will say, how many points are you? And then you will tell them how many points you have. Whoever has the lower point value gets to choose whether they want to be first player or second player. And generally, being first player is a great thing for a lot of fleets, but second player has its own advantages due to the objective cards, and that's why choosing the right objectives are important as well. I'm going to talk about objectives a lot more in my advanced squad building video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But make sure you count up your points and have them written down. You also generally want to have a printed out or written down version of your list that you can give to your opponent, or just simply let them come around to your side of the table and look at everything. But early on, it's best to have your list written down somewhere, so this way it's easy for somebody to make sure that you have that you have the right amount of points. If you're playing in a tournament or a league, you have to fill out a slip at the end, and it's usually you're writing down how many points your opponent got versus how many points you got, and it just helps to have it all written down. Also, if you like the fleet and you want to make notes or whatever, you'll make changes. You can write it down on your sheet, so this way or you can reuse the same sheet for the next time. So this way you don't forget what you had built. But this has just been basic squad building. There's one more rule that's very, very, very important, and that's to have fun. This game is fantastically fun. Armada is it's beautiful, it's huge, and it's a great, great time. And you should never take it too seriously to the point where you don't have fun. So that's my advice for you guys for basic squad building. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next video, which will be advanced squad building for Armada, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about different strategies and things that go into making a really good winning squad. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. I'm doing giveaways, by the way, so if you are interested in winning a free $20 Amazon gift card so you can get your own physical copy of Star Wars Rogue One, you'll have to leave a comment on one of my Star Wars Theory videos, and you must be a subscriber. Other than that, guys, thank you so much. Give this video a thumbs up, leave me a comment if you like, and I will and check me out on Crabbok.com. Check out some of my other videos too. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.